So let's talk about comma splices and how to avoid them. So comma splice is one of the most common mistakes that you will see at the SATs. And if you understand comma splices, you probably understand like 60 or 70% of all the grammar questions. So let's look at the example of a comma splice. The experiment was unsuccessful and the temperature was not controlled sufficiently. So there is a comma. And this comma is the main thing that you should focus on right now. Because we got two independent clauses. The experiment was unsuccessful and the temperature was not controlled sufficiently. Both are independent clauses and they're just connected with a comma, and it is not correct. You can't just connect two independent clauses with a comma in between them. If you want to connect them without changing many things about this sentence, you can use a dot instead of comma, or a semicolon, or a colon. But colon is not always right because it depends on the meaning of the sentence. So you basically look at the comma and a semicolon, which also mean the same thing. And yeah, you gotta use a dot or a semicolon to connect two independent clauses. But you can also change the clauses with conjunctions. For like in this example, we changed the comma, but we can make this sentence correct without changing the comma, but with changing the clauses themselves. We can use coordinating conjunctions, which you have probably heard about, the fanboys, the famous fanboys. Like in this example, we got I studied and I was nervous, which are both independent clauses, and you just add but in between them after a comma, and this sentence is correct. Like comma plus any of the fanboys, I don't want to write the full thing, is equal to a comma or a semicolon. Like you can use it. It is really like that convenient. The second example, she was tired, so she went home. She went home, independent clause. She was tired, independent clause. And so comma plus fanboys, the S, and that's it. The sentence is correct. It's that easy. And the second way is using subordinating conjunctions. The main thing to look at is the word sub. Subordinating conjunction basically makes the independent clause to a dependent. That's why we focus on the word sub. So you got while I studied, my brother watched TV. It is pretty easy. You know that while I studied is a dependent clause, because you can't just say while I studied. You gotta finish the sentence. While I studied is actually made from a subordinating conjunction word while, and then an independent clause I studied. So you basically made a dependent clause from the independent clause I studied by adding a subordinating conjunction. Why am I talking about this? Because you gotta know what is happening in a sentence. You don't necessarily need to know every name of like every type of conjunction, but you gotta understand how like the independent clause and dependent clauses are made, from what they are made, and there is a use for that. For example, if you got independent clause at the start of a sentence, you gotta add a comma. But if the dependent clause comes after the independent clause, for example, in this sentence is my brother watch TV. It is not necessary, but you can add them. My brother watched TV while I studied. Like, my brother watched TV, comma, while I studied. It is correct. And also, my brother watched TV, no comma, while I studied. Also correct. So that's also the thing. Also, do not mistake the conjunctive adverbs. Like, the folks who prepared for IELTS know the linking words. Linking words are like completely other thing. You need to understand that. Do not mistake them with conjunctions. They are not the same thing. So let's look at example. This is a reading and writing question. Boundaries, easy question. Let's look at this question. While one requires oxygen and one does, and the gap, we have two words, not and aerobic. So while one requires oxygen and one does not, so does not with not, this will be a dependent clause that is finished. Let's look at this. While I study, it is basically the same thing. While one requires oxygen and one does not. Do you remember I talked about like how if you got dependent clause at the start of a sentence, you gotta add a comma? So in this example, you should probably do the same stuff, like just add a comma, and the rest of a sentence, we do not really care about that. So it is C. While one requires oxygen and one does not, aerobic and anaerobic respiration are both forms of cellular respiration, and yada yada yada. Let's look at this example. This time it is a medium question, so it might be a little bit harder. The mission initiative, which was approved by Congress, we can ignore this. We do not need this because it is a supplement. We only care about the structure of a sentence, so yeah, that's also a life hack if you want to use it. The mission represented a major investment in the infrastructure of overburdened national parks, and there are some kinds of punctuation that comes after it. The mission represented a major investment in infrastructure of overburdened national parks. It is an independent clause. If you add parks, all the words that come before parks, and that sentence will be an independent clause. So parks, that's an independent clause. It prioritized physical improvement to parks, roads, utilities, and yada yada yada. This is a separate independent clause. So we can use fanboys because there are two independent clauses, or we can use any of this one. We have two independent clauses, and to connect them, we can use either fanboys or comma, semicolon, or a colon. We got semicolon, so this is probably correct. Parks, B. We cannot add two independent clauses without any type of punctuation. This could have been correct if there was a comma, because it will be comma plus fanboys to add two independent clauses, but it does not have comma, so it is not correct. This is not correct. This will be a comma splice that we talked